Hey guys, I just got this box in the mail from TRACT Optics, and I happen to know this has a set of binoculars in it. And I've got some glass here lined up that I'm used to using, so this has been my history. And I'd like to say that I was in the market for an upgrade, and I did all my research and spent a week reading about these things, and finally settled on the TRACT Optics based on the specifications, the reviews, whatever information's out there. But the truth of the matter is, I was selected for a gear test by TRACT Optics, and they sent me these free of charge, and the only thing I have to do in exchange is to provide an unbiased review on these. So basically, I pretended that I was in the market for a new set of 10 by 50 binoculars, and I did all the research anyway. So what I'd like to do today is sort of take you through the specifications of the competitive offerings that are out there and see how this set of TRACT optics stacks up against them. But first, a little baseline. So these are some optics that I have experience with. These guys closest to me are probably my baseline benchmark comparison for everything. I've had these for probably close to 20 years. It's a Nikon Action Extreme in 10 by 50, and believe it or not, they still make these today. I think they retail for about 150 bucks, so they're a pretty budget-friendly binocular, and I've been very happy with them over the years that I've used them. Like I said, these are the binoculars I have the most experience with out of any. So this is going to be the benchmark that I compare to. And then I've got a couple more recent additions to my binoculars. So these are kind of a do-it-all 10 by 50. And then I wanted basically one bigger and one smaller. So a couple years ago, I picked up two pairs of Vortex Diamondback HD. This one's in 15 by 56. I specifically bought this for a Colorado elk hunt that I was doing last year, where I knew I was going to be doing some long-range glassing. I've got the tripod adapter on there, so these are mostly used from glassing off a tripod. And then I also wanted just a simple small pair that I could wear around the woods here in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, more for close range viewing. I guess I'd like to call these my turkey hunting binoculars. So I usually carry these with a chest strap. They sit right here. If I want to check anything out, I just pull them up to my eyes, and it's right there. They're small, they're light. These are a 8 by 32 and also a Vortex Diamondback HD. And then just for comparison's sake, these are actually borrowed. This is a Leupold BX2 Acadia. So these are discontinued. They aren't made anymore. I think these retailed for around $220. So basically you've got $220 glass. This is about a little over $200. You've got these 15 by 56s, which go for around $350. And then you've got $150. So let's imagine I was in the market for an upgrade and not quite looking at the alpha glass. I don't have a $3,000 budget for binoculars, but give myself a $1,000 budget, and let's see how the competition stacks up. And specifically, I want to upgrade my 10 by 50s. So I'm going to be looking a little bit down here at the screen. I'll superimpose. I've got a PowerPoint comparing the specifications, the published specifications of all the different competitive offerings out there, and I'll put that up here, probably right up in here on the screen. So what we're looking at is we've got the TRACT TORIC 10 by 50, and this is what I've got in the box here, still unopened. And I wanted to compare that to some competitive offerings on the market from some of the biggest names out there. So comparing, we've got the Vortex Razor HD, also 10 by 50. We've got a Leupold BX5 HD 10 by 50, the Sig Sauer Zulu 8 HDX, and then a Maven B6. So let's take a look at the cost first and foremost. So as far as the cost goes, the TRACT comes in actually the lowest of the bunch. It comes in at $744, and one of the things they brag about on their website is they are a direct-to-consumer business. They don't do retail. They don't sell to retail. They don't do distribution. So the claim is that you avoid a retail markup, which based on experience is probably around 20%. So in theory, buying from direct to consumer, I should get about 20% more value for my money spent. As far as the competition, you've got the Vortex Razor HD. That comes in at $879.99 on Amazon. Most of these ignore the MSRP price that's given on the website for the ones that distribute. So if you go to Vortex's website and you look up the MSRP for this model binoculars, it's going to tell you they're like a $1,300 pair of binoculars, but nobody actually pays that. So for most of these that do retail distribution, I went and pulled the price off of Amazon, because Amazon seems to do a pretty good job of adjusting to whatever the lowest market price is for these. So we're at $879 for the Vortex. The Loophole goes for $899.99, call it $900. The Sig Sauer goes for $850. And the Maven is the most expensive of the group. They come in at $1,050. So exceeding my $1,000 budget by a little bit, but for $50, we'll include them. So let's take a look at the warranty. So TRACT, they offer we'll call it a conditional life warranty. So basically what that says is they're going to warranty this optic against any manufacturing defects for the life of the optic. And it is transferable, so you don't have to have proof of purchase. You don't have to be the original owner. I can give this away, and the person I give it to will also have the same warranty offering from TRACT. So that's nice. And basically, if it gets water inside of it, or if the rubber coating starts peeling off of it or something like that, they're going to go ahead and replace or repair that unit. And then you come into the Vortex, and I believe one of the biggest reasons for the Vortex explosion in the hunting optics space is their unconditional life warranty that's fully transferable. They kind of pioneered that. They introduced it, and I want to say they came on the market in like the early 2000s, and it's probably been the fastest explosion I've seen in optics, in hunting optics. And it's interesting, if you go on their website and you click on their warranty, they call it their VIP warranty. One of the first things you see is there's this picture. It's a side-by-side picture of a completely cremated pair of binoculars, almost unrecognizable, next to a brand new set of binoculars. And the caption of the image reads, "House fire, covered." So basically they're saying that regardless what happens, they're going to keep you in a fully functioning pair of optics, which is really nice. You've heard about people running them over with their truck, and they cover that. There's obviously the house fire example. So they go well beyond the standard sort of manufacturer's defects coverage. Loophole, very similar to TRACT. It's a conditional life transferable warranty. Sig Sauer, same thing, conditional life transferable. And then Maven, I was actually surprised to read that. They've kind of jumped on the Vortex train, and they're offering this almost equivalent unconditional life transferable warranty. So if you read into it, there are a couple conditions. It says that they don't warrant intentional damage. So if you're dragging these things intentionally behind your truck, they're not going to cover that, which is very understandable. But it does provide for replacement or repair under accidental damage or loss. So that's pretty cool. Overall, I don't plan on running my binoculars over with a truck, so I'm not super caught up in the warranties, as long as it is some sort of a life warranty against manufacturing defects. But I will say that the Vortex and Maven options do stand out a little bit to me here. Just the fact that if anything does happen, I've essentially entered into a contract with that company to always have an optic to use. So that's one place I would say Vortex and Maven pull ahead a little bit. As far as the length goes, these are all fairly similar. The Sig Sauer is a little bit shorter in length at 6.4 inches. The TRACT are actually the longest at 7 inches. But overall, that's not something I'm going to use too much as a buying decision in these. The weight, I guess going along with being the physically largest of the bunch, the TRACT are also the heaviest of the bunch. They're at 32.6 ounces. whereas the lightest are the Vortex, and then the next heaviest are the Leupold at 31.5 ounces. Field of view at 1,000 yards. So this is actually something that's very important to me, because I'm very frequently, especially with these guys, I'll take these in a deer stand, and I'm using them typically in low light conditions to analyze deer that are, you know, they might be 30 yards away. So you're in dense timber, you're looking at something that's 30 yards away, and it's an important characteristic for me to have a good wide field of view. So this is something I look at. In this case, the TRACT does fall a little bit short. So TRACT and Leupold specifically are at 304 feet of linear field of view at 1,000 yards, whereas the Sig Sauer kind of stands out above the rest at 346 feet. And that's significant. As a percent difference, that's pretty large as far as the overall field of view. Minimum focus distance, it's something that everybody seems to publish on their website, but it's not something I particularly care about. If I've got a pair of 10x50 binoculars, I'm probably not going to be looking at deer at 13 feet or 7 feet or whatever the number is. At that distance, I would like to think I would not need a 10x50 binocular to inspect them. So, like I said, it's not really something I'm caught up in. But I guess in this case, if you are, TRACT and SIG are kind of on the worst end of it at 13.1 feet. And the Maven pull out ahead of the rest. They can focus all the way down to 7.5 feet of distance. So interpupillary distance. So this is something that I'm guessing not a lot of guys care about, but I particularly do. Apparently I have eyes that are very close together. And I've actually picked up binoculars, and these Vortex 15x56 are one of them. You'll notice the barrels on these are literally touching each other. They are adjusted to the closest possible setting to accommodate my specific eyes. And for me, that's like a bare minimum. If I can't go at least this small, I'm not interested. So it is something I look at. I like something that goes small, and I don't know, maybe there's other people that like something that go big. In this case, these are all pretty consistent. The Sig Sauer gives you a couple extra millimeters on the small end over the TRACT, and the Maven are the two with I guess the largest low end adjustment. And again, they're all pretty similar on the high end, so all in that, 56, 58 on the low end to 72 to 74 on the high end, and that's of course millimeters. Eye relief. So this is something I pay a little attention to. It's not necessarily a buying decision for me, but in this case, the TRACT does stand out above the rest along with the Leupold. So the Sig Sauer comes in at the lowest at 16 millimeters. TRACT is the highest at 19.3 millimeters. So lens coatings. I'm just going to say on lens coatings, I feel really bad for the guy who actually has a superior lens coating, because if you look at any of these optics, especially in the premium space, every one of them has their own unique buzzwords for describing their lens coatings, and it really goes beyond lens coatings. They're talking about prism coatings and some different things, but they're always trademarked. They're always some of them are trademarked, some of them are registered trademarked. And I get it. These are purchased chemical substances that they're in some way applying to make this glass more durable, more fog-proof, more scratch-proof, all that good stuff. And I get that some are probably better than others, but in this case, it's really hard without actually experiencing them and testing them to know which is better and which isn't, because they all use very similar buzzwords to describe their coatings. As far as waterproofing, IPX7 seems to be kind of the industry standard. So that's submersible. Don't quote me on this, but I want to say it's like a meter submersible for 30 minutes. And this is where I'm going to pick on Vortex a little bit. So Vortex, I just said yes because they don't really provide a waterproof, dustproof rating on their optics. And really from this point on, I struggled to get information from Vortex. Vortex doesn't publish a ton of information on their website, and you're going to see this as we keep going on the chart. Most of the other guys reported either an IPX7 rating or Leupold, in this case, said that theirs are submersible to 33 feet. So what that translates to in an IP rating, I'm not exactly sure. As far as the prism, TRACT uses a Schmidt-Pekin prism. None of these use an Abe-Koenig prism. We're not really looking at the alpha glass here that typically use those. Similar situation, Vortex did not specifically disclose what they're using for a prism. They just said it's a roof prism. So I'm assuming it's somewhat of a variation of a Schmidt-Pekin prism. As with the Leupold, they didn't specifically say either. I'm assuming it's some variation of Schmidt-Pekin. So that seems to be this price point seems to come in with a Schmidt-Pekin prism. As far as glass, it's not something I would base my buying decision off of, but I wanted to include it here because TRACT seems to be very proud of the glass that they're using. They cite this, I don't know if that's an acronym or if I'm supposed to pronounce it, but SCHOTT or SCHOTT, HT glass. I'm assuming HT stands for high transmission. That's a guess. So I'm excited to see sort of what benefits I get from that. In fact, TRACT goes as far as including that right in the sort of the title page of that particular optic lineup that it uses that glass. So they're very proud of their glass. These other manufacturers are not so much. I think Vortex, Leupold, and SIG on their websites, they just call it HD, which is, to be honest, one of the most abused buzzwords in the optic space. High definition. There's really no substance to it. It's not quantifiable. Anybody can call any optic high definition, and it's just kind of a buzzword that gets thrown around. So I don't really put any weight behind that. And then Maven was a little bit more proud of their glass. They use a ELD-ED. ELD stands for, I believe it's extra low dispersion. So it looks like TRACT and Maven are kind of the two that use more of a premium glass, and the others not so much. That's my interpretation, at least. So getting into purge gas, so TRACT and Vortex both use argon, and then Leupold uses a proprietary gas that they don't want to disclose. SIG and Maven both use nitrogen. And I did a little bit of research on this, and the consensus seems to be that argon is the superior gas to use in this case. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one is it's a larger molecular structure than nitrogen, which means that it's less susceptible to seeping past the seals and ultimately leaking out of the binoculars. So that's sort of the helium in a balloon effect. You know how a helium balloon slowly deflates itself over time, and the helium is such a small molecular structure that it physically seeps through the pores of the material. So we're talking gases here that are very small molecular structures, and they are susceptible to the same effects. And then the other benefit that I've read about with argon is that it has a higher thermal conductivity, which just means that it has more of a tendency for the temperature inside the binocular to equal the temperature outside the binocular. Less of a temperature delta across the lens means less likelihood to fog. And that's something I'm particularly interested to test out on these TRACT, because if I was to cite one complaint that I've had with the Nikons, it's just that, it's the fogging. It's always the frosty, cold mornings that you're sitting up in the deer stand and you go to put these up to your face, and it seems like you've got about 10 seconds to look through them, and then your lenses are completely fogged. Then you pull them away from your face, and then the fog freezes, and you're left with a bunch of frost on the lens, and then you're sitting there with your fingernail trying to scrape the frost off your lens so you can use your binoculars. So that's a big problem, and probably the biggest complaint I've had with these. So if there's something these TRACT optics can do to fix that, and hopefully it's this argon purging process, that would be a big win for any optic. Getting into the construction. So again, I did a little bit of research here. The two that I'm seeing are magnesium and aluminum among premium glass. And consensus is that magnesium is the superior construction material for the chassis of the binoculars. Magnesium just simply has a stronger strength to weight ratio, or a higher strength to weight ratio versus aluminum. So that means it's a lighter material and it's also a stronger material. So it's superior, but it's also more expensive and more difficult to machine versus aluminum. So TRACT and Vortex both use magnesium, as does the Maven. Leupold uses aluminum, and Sig Sauer uses metal. That's what they say on their website, and I guess I would assume that's some sort of an aluminum or an aluminum alloy, but that's unknown at this point. A locking diopter, that's something that's important for me if I'm upgrading. It's something that none of these have, these lower price point binoculars. And it just seems to be something I'm playing with when I'm out using them all the time, where I think I'd have a little bit more peace of mind if it could lock. Something like the Vortex, they do a good job. This is kind of recessed in here, so it's difficult to bump, and it's pretty stiff, so it's difficult to turn. And I guess I haven't had any problems with it turning or coming out of focus on me in the field, but still something, if I can get a locking diopter, that's a plus to me. So as far as that goes, TRACT and SIG are the only two in this lineup that offer the locking diopter. The rest do not, and they rely more on just the stiffness or the recess to prevent that from coming out of adjustment in the field. And then lastly, tripod mounting. All of these are tripod compatible. As far as what I'm using, the Nikons are obviously the Vortex 15x56R, the Vortex Diamondback. What are these, 8x32s? These are also tripod compatible, and then the Leupolds are not. And that is something that's important to me, because I will probably use these for some Western glassing with tripod applications. So in this spec comparison, one of the things that I was trying to identify is specifically what market is TRACT targeting with this TORIC series of binoculars. And it seems to me like what they're trying to do is establish a premium optic, not necessarily an alpha optic, but a premium optic at a slightly more affordable price than the most directly comparable optics on the market. And that's sort of what this table shows. I mean, you've got an optic that's essentially equivalent in specification to all these other big-time manufacturers and their offerings, and it comes in at a slightly more affordable price. So you're $105 less than the next closest thing, the Sig Sauer, and all the way up to the Maven, where you're coming in at $305 less or $306 less. And that's pretty significant. And I would also say that TRACT has done a good job going through and sort of hand-picking the premium features that they want to add to this glass. So for example, they're very proud of their prism, their Schmidt-Pekin prism, and the coatings that are applied there. They're very proud of their SCH OTT HT glass, if I'm even saying that right. And like I said, I'm excited to experience that. I appreciate the argon purging. I appreciate the magnesium construction. And I appreciate the fact that they've given us a locking diopter. So again, they've gone through and they've sort of handpicked these premium features and applied them while keeping the price a little bit more affordable than some of the others. Probably the biggest thing that's not exciting to me is the field of view at 1,000 yards. At 304 feet, that's significantly less than some of the competition. So for example, the Sig Sauer is at 346 feet. TRACT is at 304 feet. As a percent difference, that's pretty large, and that is an important criteria for me. So I'm a little bit turned off by that. Some other people might not appreciate the weight and the length. So you've got, if you compare them to the lightest binocular, again, the Sig Sauer at 24 ounces. These come in at 32.6 ounces. So here you've got an optic that's about a half a pound heavier than some of the competition. So a few negatives, but overall I would say it's, spec-wise, TRACT seems like a very viable option in the marketplace. And I would say if I did go with one of these others over TRACT, it would probably be more of a function of brand loyalty. It might be more of a function of experience. Maybe I've experienced some of these brands. And that is one, I guess, tricky thing I see with breaking into this market. It's a very competitive market, and as a small guy, as a newcomer like TRACT, I think I Googled and they've been established since 2015, so they're relatively new and still kind of a boutique offering. It's really difficult to experience them firsthand. So unless there's something in the specifications that are stand out above the rest and just scream, buy this one, I'm probably going to default to brand loyalty to Vortex, for example. You know, if I've used Vortex my entire life, I'm probably going to continue buying Vortex. So that's just something to think about here. Had TRACT not sent me these as a gear test sample, first of all, I had never heard of them. And secondly, I had never experienced their optics. So without experience in their optics, I probably would have defaulted to something that I had experienced and had experience with. So that's something to think about. It's something that makes breaking into this market very difficult. I think it's something that Vortex did very well by introducing their unconditional warranty, and I really believe that's the key attribute to their explosion in the market. So something for, you know, if the TRACT guys watch this, I guess that's something that I would challenge them with, is these specifications are equivalent. Maybe I can save anywhere from $150 to $300 versus the equivalent competition. But aside from that, there's nothing really stand out above the rest in the specifications. And again, I'm excited to open up the box, experience the product, and maybe when I get the product in my hands, it speaks for itself, but we'll see. That's to be determined.